In this video, I want to talk about how I've used the Excel filter function to streamline project financial reporting. I'm actually going to break this concept out over a few videos, and all will cover something I've worked on in a variety of settings, a financial workbook. So, this is a really common scenario. Your company, program, or office has to keep track of a variety of funding levels spread across dozens of projects. So, often what happens is a workbook gets created and each project gets its own sheet or tab. And some poor soul finds themselves making lots of manual updates to each of those tabs. And what can be worse is oftentimes those entries may need to be done multiple times manually across a whole slew of other workbooks or documents. So, in part one today, I'm going to show you how I've used the filter function to expedite the update of that type of workbook. It may not fit your exact situation, but I'm hoping this video gives you an idea of what's possible in your daily work. So, here I have a sample workbook that I've created, and in it there are a few project tabs, project 0001, 0002, and so on. We'll start here by taking a look at the first one. They all share the same structure. First, a project title up top, then a project expenditure table consisting of what's been funded, the sum of costs from the bottom table, funds remaining in dollars, as well as the percentage of funds remaining. Then at the bottom is the table I alluded to a second ago, which has the itemized project cost. And as I click through its cells, you can see that these have been manually entered. So again, it can be painful if you're having to tab through this workbook, regardless of whatever shortcuts you may be using, if you're having to hard code these figures in. Not to mention that increased manual entry adds to the risk of human error, which can cause more pain later to diagnose and then to take corrective actions on. So, how can I streamline the entry into each one of these tabs? Well, one approach would be to create a sheet or tab in your workbook that you use to enter all of your raw data into. Think of it as a central hub where all of your entries can be done in one location and then referenced within each project tab. I know the title says manually entered, but you could also paste this data in. The key here though, no pun intended, is the left-hand project code column. By classifying each cost by project code, this will help us use the filter function to pull what you need into each tab. Also note that this raw data table is an actual table, which makes it easier for reference in formulas. So at this point of the scenario, all of the relevant project data needed is in this raw cost data table. Next, we'll start pulling this data into each tab. So if I go back to project 0001, note before I change anything that the total costs are $4,160. Next, I'm going to go into the project itemized cost. I'm going to select all of this data, and then I'm going to delete it. Note that these cells are not part of a table. They're just cells underneath my blue header row. Next, I will enter the filter function in the top left cell of where I want my data to be. And the formula will return a dynamic array. A filter has two required arguments. First, the array or source, which for us today is the raw data table, which then is followed by include, which I think of as the criteria that you want the filter to be based off of. And for this example, it's going to be our project code from the raw data table. So I'll close this bracket. And we want this code to equal 0001 or simply 1. Now there is a third optional argument in the filter function, and this is called if empty, which is basically the value that you want displayed if there is no match for what you're looking for. For example, you could make that value some text that says something like no match found or error or similar. You could just ignore the argument, and if no matches are found, then the array will be blank. For this example, I'm not going to use if empty, so I will go back and delete the comma, close my parentheses, and hit enter. So now that I've used the filter function, you can see all of the same values that were here before are present again. It's just that now they're being pulled from my raw data table. You can also see that the sum value is now $4,160 because the dynamic arrays of the value can be used in calculations just like a normal cell. Also, if I click the top left of the cell, B12 in this case, you can see that not only is the array displayed in an accentuated manner, but you can also see the formula just as you would any other formula. But if I click into another cell within the array, you can see that the formula has now become subdued. I also want to mention a couple common errors that you may see with the filter function. The first would be spill. So if I type something in cell B23, now I hit enter, this will cause a spill error because there's not enough room for the full array to be displayed. But as soon as I go back up here, I delete that. Now you can see the array is in full view again. So keep in mind that this is a live connection, so to speak, from the raw data table. And if I did have some hard-coded information in row 24 and more entries for project code 1 were entered into the raw data table, then this array would have another spill error because there wouldn't be enough room for it to grow. The second error that I wanted to talk about is the calc error, which you will see in the include argument, which is the second argument here. So if it's looking for something that does not exist, then it will give you the calc error. So for this example, I will change my 1 to a 5 and hit enter. And now you can see I have a calc error. So if I go back into the cell, I go back and edit it, and I change it to something that exists, which we want to be 1 in this case, and I hit enter. Now my array is back to normal. You also have options to use and or criteria within the include argument. If I move over to project 3, I've already used filter here and included the and criteria. And is represented by the asterisk. Note that each component of this include argument is in parentheses. So at the moment, I'm using filter to pull any line items that have both a project code of 3 and their cost unit is greater than 0. So if I go up here and I change this cost unit to be greater than 7, when I hit enter, you can see that the array changes dramatically. So if I go back into the cell and change the 7 back into a 0 and hit enter, now you can see that the array is it was just a second ago. If I move over to project 4, I've done similarly, but this time for the OR criteria, where OR is represented by the plus sign. Again, each component of our criteria is contained in parentheses. At the moment, we're using filter to grab all line items from our raw data table, where the project code is either equal to 4 or equal to 3. So if I delete this plus symbol and the rest of the text that indicates project code equal to 3, I hit enter. Now all that remains is project 4 data. Lastly, I want to address my header setup here. So as I mentioned before, the dynamic array is not a table. I set up the blue header row with filter buttons, which can be found in the data tab of the ribbon and then in the sort and filter group. However, these filter buttons will not behave as they would normally with regular cell data. I can use them to filter, but I cannot use them to sort array data. For example, I'll select cost units and I'll select equal to 1. And as you can see, I can filter as normal. So let me go back here and I will clear this filter. But now if I try to sort something, say cost rate, smallest to largest, you can see I get an error. I get a dialog box that says you can't change part of an array. So that wraps it up for this video. Again, I hope this sparks some ideas on how you can use Excel's filter function to streamline your own reporting. I'll include links to Microsoft documentation below, and feel free to reach out to me anytime on LinkedIn or by email. Thanks.